All right, Matt Wagner. I am now recording. I'm going to switch our audio like I told you. So, to the audience, if I screw this up, this is the one thing I haven't perfected on Zoom yet. Let's see here. Okay. So, all right, Matt, you still hearing me?
Yep, perfect.
Okay. So I can't hear you, so that's okay. All right. So now you still hearing me?
Yep.
Got you. Okay. You got me? Talk to me.
Yeah, you're good.
All right. Well, okay. So, listener, sorry you had to go through that little sound check there, but I am joined from the other side of the pond, as it were, with my buddy, Matt Wagner. Dude, it's been so long, and just having the little off camera, off mic catch up session was awesome. You know, the closest thing we had to that, even we've kept in touch over the years through social media and stuff. And then whenever I went to Paris for my honeymoon, you were my
Yeah.
personal tour guide because you've been an expatriate, a European of sorts for so long now. So, man, thanks for coming on.
Yeah, I'm proud. I mean, I'm honored to join, obviously, with the folks that you have in the podcast list, but and also an honor to talk to the Hot Tots intern as well. So,
Yes.
but yeah, it's great to catch up, and I'm looking forward to talking through some stuff, and I'm happy to share my experiences. In every aspect of living abroad since really 2011. Yeah.
Well, and the thing is, Matt, that what I've seen you do, and I got to say, and it sounds patronizing when you say this to a peer, but I mean, I hope you take it in the vein that it's meant. I'm proud of you. I mean, you've done so many things that, I mean, look, guys like us, and by the way, I'm representing our
Nice.
lumberjacks, got the
Go
SF,
Jacks.
yeah, Axum, baby. You know, I sit on an advisory board at the business school, and I'm constantly telling them, look, McKinsey's not recruiting from SFA. You know, Bain is not
Mm-hmm.
recruiting from SFA. Goldman
Right.
Sachs is not rolling up to SFA going, okay, where are the superstars? So people that graduate from SFA kind of have to chart their own path. And I don't say that as a knock on SFA. In fact, I think that if leveraged properly, it gives us a benefit. And man, what
I
I'm
agree.
always preaching is that I know, like in my circle, and you were, I'm one of the first guys. You're older than me, but not by much. I guess you're a couple years older than me, and one of the very first guys, upperclassmen that I met when I went to SFA. And all these guys, I mean, we've got Brady Smith out in LA, who's a successful actor of his own right, author, artist.
Yep.
We've got
Yep.
Kyle Adams here in East Texas, owns a chain of stores and is just crushing it. Tim Barry has he's doing private equity. You have been on the other side of the world, just killing it now, a senior manager in the tech space. And there's just all these people that I knew personally that are doing cool things. And
JP's
so,
probably up there as well. Yeah.
who?
JP. Yeah.
Oh, JP is, yeah, he just came back from Singapore. He's now back in
Yeah.
California.
He was in
Exactly.
Bahrain for a number of years. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, so people doing really cool things. And so that's why I'm glad that, so I just want to say I'm proud of you because you broke out of that a small no-name university from East Texas to go to the other side of the world, where I remember sitting in a conference room one time when I was at Home Depot with all these guys that were in this program from Ivy League business schools, going around saying where they came from. And I raised my hand, Stephen F. Austin State University. And they're all like, wait, where's that? And what? And so
I had something similar with some people over here I could tell you about. Yeah.
well, that's what I'm saying. I mean, I got to imagine if that's in Atlanta, Georgia, here in the States, then being in Europe, saying they're like, who the hell is Stephen F. Austin?
I was one time, so I was in a conversation and we were with a partner and client, and there's a term called Oxbridge, basically Oxford or Cambridge. Yeah.
Yep.
And you could tell the accents very quickly. They're very posh. And so we're having a beer, which when you go out to a beer here with two other people, it means actually 3 beers because everyone needs to buy a round. Yeah. So we're probably on our second round, and one of the gents says, "Matthew, where did you school?" And I said, "Okay, I know where he's asking. Where did I go to prep school is really the question." But I answered it. I said, look, I went to the Harvard of Deep East Texas, or the Pawnee Woods of Deep East Texas. And they looked at me and said, you need to explain that. So then I had to go into explaining Nacogdoches and what Stephen F. Austin was and who Stephen F. Austin
Yeah.
was and all the, yeah. But, you know, they looked at me sideways, but it was fun. It was a fun conversation.
Well, I can imagine, but now here you are. And so here's where I want to take this thing. Let's just, I think so much of where you end up is where you start, you know. Now it may not always determine, you know, your success in the long run, but it does shape your journey for sure. And, you know, talk to us about where you started, how you came to SFA. And then what I really want to get into at some point, I know we will, I'll jump around, but is try to keep some sort of a chronological line going, is
Yeah.
the first of all, you're just your ability to see that travel is possible. And I love what you and your wife did in your first year marriage. I mean, there's so many rules you broke. And again,
Yeah.
and when I say that, listener, if any of you out there, my blog is called Make Your Own Rules for a reason, because it took me 45 years to realize in a lot of ways we live by a lot of rules that society made up. We didn't. And we just follow them because that's what we're supposed to do. And that doesn't mean that you can to go do rebellious acts. It just means that
Sure.
things like you can go travel the world with your spouse before you start the family. There's time to do those things. You did that. So we'll get to that. But first, where does the story begin with Matt Wagner?
So, you know, in the spirit of Texas Titans, so we were one of those families, you know, that we weren't born in Texas, but we got there as quickly as possible.
Very wise.
So, I was born in the Frank Sinatra wing of the Atlantic City, New Jersey hospital. So
nice.
Old Frank invested money into really a maternity wing. So I was born there. And I grew up down the island. So Atlantic City was a kind of a mixed bag of neighborhoods. And I grew up in the town called Ventnor, which is probably more of a blue collar town. A lot of us affectionately call us Ventnor Dirt. And most of us had, you know, some of us didn't know how little we had, you know, kind of thing, which was great. And there were some haves, but there was definitely more of the middle to less. And we were on that spectrum. So my parents were very, very young when they had us. So they were 23 by the time they had 3 boys. And I came out and I was the middle of 3 with the club foot. So I added challenges on top of it, which, you know, part of that I saw a lot of the hard work from my parents. You know, both of them, you know, worked jobs. You know, my dad was always working at different things, usually multiple jobs as well. And then my mom, you know, I had this opportunity to go to DuPont, which was in Wilmington, Delaware, to get really treatment on my foot. And she would drive me every 2 to 3 days to get a cast changed on my foot. So, you know, you don't realize that then, because you just think, oh, this is a great time with my mom. And I always thought, oh, we could get McDonald's at the end. Yeah. But I could see that determination. She was probably so exhausted, you know, driving me back and forth. It's about 90 minutes plus, you know, the treatments during the day and then slugging the way back. And then, you know, I saw that, but actually you don't realize this, you know, because you just live with these different things, and it's a birth defect, yeah, clubfoot, but you just live with it and you learn how to live with it. And then at 5 years old, I had a surgery, which helped corrected it. But, you know, it was always difficult, and it still causes pain and different things. But those certain things and seeing that around me, seeing that hard work just in my immediate family, but my expanded family, and then actually having the club foot was probably one of the best things that ever happened to me. I don't think about it now. I don't think about it hardly at all, but it shaped my work ethic, my can-do, perseverance, all these different things that, you know, ultimately kind of build your character, you know.
I can totally relate to that, Matt, on a couple levels. One, you know, my youngest was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes when she was 16. And we do kind of, when she was younger, there was not a pediatric endocrinologist in Tyler, which until you're 18, you're still considered pediatric. So I would drive her to Dallas to Children's for her checkups and all that stuff for her diabetes. And she has already said the same thing. She kind of misses those trips to Dallas. It very much reminded me of what you just said. And then, I really admire what you said there about how you think it was a benefit because it forced you into working harder. I know that has been the case with Abby, but also the same thing has been proven with folks that have dyslexia, that they tend to rise the ranks in their companies. They turn out to be harder workers because of that, because they're having to overcome. So
yeah, they have to muscle through, and
exactly,
and even on the emotional intelligence standpoint, some of those folks that have dyslexia are usually at the high end that I've seen.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah, so you don't wish this upon your kids, but actually coming from say humble means, but then also that experience, and then actually helped shape me. I wanted to play sports. I really wasn't supposed to play sports, but I did anyway. So played football, baseball, basketball. I wanted to be a basketball star growing up in New Jersey, and then I loved football as well. But of course my vertical was non-existent with a club foot. So but it's a pretty amazing that I could do that. But then also the doctor was telling my parents not to allow me to. So again, kids want to be kids, and they let me do that. That was unbeknownst to me at the time, of course. Yeah. But again, I go back to, my parents really setting the stage of, surrounded by obviously love and affection, but really can-do spirit and perseverance and determination and all those different things. And, by having hurdles, you unbeknownst, you kind of go over that, because you have to. There's no other choice.
Right. So then you come to Texas, and you've made it to God's country, like Davy Crockett. You find your way to Texas. So how does that go? And then take me through to how you become a lumberjack. How does that brilliant decision? Because buddy, that was big time.
So I lived on the Jersey Shore. So moving to Texas, and we moved to Houston. So right out of Houston, Cy-Fair High School, fighting bobcats. Bobcat fight never dies. And it was complete culture shock, complete different world. Of course, it was 1987, pre-internet. I was writing letters back to friends, back in, New Jersey and all this thing. So, and this was when actually long distance calls were expensive. So it was ripping the Band-Aid off and figuring it out. We were, actually Texas high school football helped us with that transition. So my older brother was a junior, I was a freshman. My younger brother was seventh grade. So we almost made instant friends, and then we were pretty decent ball players as well. So that helps with, getting friends and popularity and all these things. But really my vision was I actually wanted to be a teacher, because every summer I'd go back to New Jersey and lifeguard on the beach. So I lifeguarded on the beach through high school. I lived with my aunt, and that continued on into SFA. And I wanted to be a teacher and then lifeguard in the summer. And that's what I wanted to do. So my thought was, okay, Texas high school football maybe, and then lifeguarding in New Jersey in the summer. So how that would work with kids, I don't know how that would work with kids. Of course it would change. But that was why I went to SFA really, and I studied history and political science. So I double major in history, political science. Now, thankfully, you have student teaching, and in that semester, I realized, okay, I don't have the patience to be a teacher. Yeah. These people are another breed of patience, and actually a lot of people in my family, my brother, my wife, her siblings are all teachers or in the teaching profession. So much patience that I just knew I didn't have. So then I did internship at the state attorney general's office because I thought I was going to go to law school. I got into the University of Tulsa Law School, and then I realized, okay, if these private or public guys are, do I really want to go into private? Probably. So I didn't do that. And then Brady Smith, who was on, your program, he did this BUNAC, so which is the opportunity to get a visa to work abroad. So I thought, okay, I'm going to graduate. I still don't know what I'm going to do. I'm going to go do BUNAC, which was probably one of the best things to happen. So I came over. It was in the UK. I bartended in London for about 6 weeks, and then I worked in a hotel up in Scotland, which completely opened my eyes to different world, different, obviously different ways of living. Traveled quite a bit, and yeah, it just opened my eyes to a wider perspective. So I always wanted to travel. I just didn't have the means, but that gave me the means because I could work and then travel, during the weeks as well.
Well, and that's one of the things. Okay, now right there, listener, that's what I'm talking about as far as the rules of society. I mean, generally, you think. I mean, because I was that kid. I mean, I'm a first generation college graduate at SFA, and no one in my family or anyone that I knew backpacked through Europe. The proverbial finish school and just take a year to go see the other side of the world and learn, quote unquote, real history, where really old things exist and that sort of thing. And I was just kind of the mindset that's not for me. But great book, listener. If you listen to what Matt has just said, I want to get him to elaborate a little more on that, kind of how you went through that process, and I just want to stick there for a little bit because there are some recent or soon to be college grads that listen to the program. Rolf Potts wrote a great book called Vagabonding that is phenomenal. And he talks about this very thing I think he spent 10 years traveling abroad, and it didn't start out as a 10-year trek. It's not like he didn't decide I'm going to go spend 10 years abroad. He just went, and it turned into, and one of the things he said was what you just mentioned is that once you start to learn the culture, everyone kind of welcomes you in. Like, let's say you go to a pub or a party and they find out you're from the States. Oh, you got to come over to the house for dinner. And so he just kind of followed that along for 10 years. In the 4-Hour Work Week, Tim Ferriss touches on a lot of those things about how there are other ways to think about traveling. It doesn't have to be as simple as complicated as, well, I got to go make a crap ton of money, save up so I can do it. No, you can actually. And another thing that you said, there's, when you're how old were you at the time we went over? Like 22 probably?
22,
okay.
Yeah.
22 years old, you're still, I mean, three years prior, you were a teenager. You still have time. I know I was of the mindset, I was 22, out of school, and thought, nope, time to get married, work, save for retirement, kind of do that thing. It's like, no, you have so much time. So anyway, continue.
So I mean, I would read Paul Thoreau as another, Bill Bryson books and these type of people that, give you little dabblings, but until you really do it. I remember coming to London, landing the next day, we went out and about, we were at Westminster Abbey, and I'm a history buff, so I like to be able to connect the dots of, okay, that building was around when da-da-da-da was happening, right? So we went around the back for some reason of Westminster Abbey, and there was kind of this ruins. Obviously, it's still there, and it has a plaque there. And the guy I was with, this guy Kevin, I said, this was built in 13 something, right? I said, that's 100 something years before Christopher Columbus, like this building is older than, and then we walk a couple blocks and you hit the old Roman wall, which is even older, it's 2000 or, 1800 years old. And it's just mind boggling. So I just really got the bug, but it's the history aspect is nice, but it is, to your point, it's about the people you meet along the way. And then it's just those random things, that just happen, which I could probably fill too long, but, I remember one that really stood out. So my wife and I were in Vietnam. We were in Hue, which Hue was really the epicenter, the beginning of the DMZ. And it was kind of the epicenter of the Tet Offensive, okay? So we're just having a coffee or maybe an afternoon beer or something, and this guy comes up. And you could tell he was probably late 50s. This was 2003, so he's probably late 50s at the time. So you're kind of doing the math of what age they would be during the war. Yeah. And he said, hey, do you want to sit? Can I sit down? I said, yeah, sure. So he sat down, he told us our story. and it was amazing. So he was a kid in Hue during the time. You know, he learned his English through Americans and obviously GIs. The next day, he's like, "Hey, let's come have breakfast at my house." So we get on scooters. He has his brother. You know, we get on scooters. We go in the middle of the countryside, and we have breakfast. But we roll up, and it's the whole family.
Oh
We're
wow.
like these guests of honor, you know, and they
Yeah.
made these spring rolls all night, and it was amazing. Of course, he was the only one that really spoke fluent English, and there was a
Yeah.
couple other people, so he was the translator. But just little things like that, you know, random acts of kindness that you just have to be open for. Yeah. But yeah, there's a plethora of different stories like that. But I'm fast forwarding a little bit. So Bunac, I can't you know, highly recommend. It's BUNAC, and you know, you can get work visas, whether that be Britain or Ireland or, you know, Australia, New Zealand, etc. So if your listeners are looking, typically it's during semester, or you take a semester off, or right after, is what I did right after graduation.
So
Yeah, completely opened my eyes.
how long did you plan to do it? I mean, it turned into a. I mean, you've been over there pretty much ever since. Whenever you got the quote unquote real job. I mean, so how long did you start out planning to be there?
So, well, yeah, there's a gap in between. So so I came back after 6 months. So my visa was 6 months, and I came back to Houston, and I didn't know what I wanted to do. You know, I thought I was going to go law, thought I was going to be teaching. Of course, you know, friends and network, and I got my first gig in recruiting, and that really took off from a work standpoint. But it wasn't until we were 30 that my wife and we weren't even married yet. We took off and did a 19-month around the world,
So awesome.
and then came back, and we left from Houston, and then we moved to Denver, where our kids were born, and obviously that started a new chapter of things. But yeah, we were gone for 19 months, and again, this was internet cafes before, you know, iPhones, or even, you know, being, you know, message someone. So we sacrificed quite a bit from, you know, there's a lot of things going on with different family members and some friends and things like this, um, but you know, there's no great time to go. It's just, you know, go as much as you can. So we didn't know how long we were going to be gone for. We just had a pot of money that we knew was finite, right?
Right.
And then along the way, we knew we were going to get engaged, but we didn't know we were going to get married. And long story short, my wife has Irish citizenship, but it was difficult actually to get married there because of pre-Cana and the Catholic Church and things. So unbeknownst to us, Scotland is quite easy, and it's like the Vegas of Britain. So a lot of people go
Really.
there and get married. So so we had to be there a week before, and Molly planned actually the wedding online via the hotel manager. Do you want a Kaylee band? Do you want a buffet? Do you want everything else? And we said, yeah, sure. And where we got married was the town that I lived in and worked in northern Scotland. So we got married up there. It's about 45 people came over from the U.S. It was awesome, fantastic.
Well,
So I can't.
go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I can't. I mean, there's a couple things. Obviously, if you want to explore, there's never a good time. And
Yep.
actually, the best time, to your point, is actually in your 20s, when you don't have a lot to risk, and you don't have dependents and things like this. And then from a destination wedding, I always recommend, because yeah, the people that you really want there will get there.
They're the ones that'll show up. Exactly.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, and that's the thing too. Something that you just kind of teased out there really is that what you guys did, because you had seen the other side of the world, and again, it wasn't just, I mean, you got a visa, you worked there, you stayed there, and I think that's the only way you can truly understand is like if you just go, okay, this is where I'm going to wake up and go to work and come home for a period of time. You gave yourselves so many more options than say I had, that I'd given myself. I mean, I just because one, I'd never been to Europe, at that point in my life, but that's one of the things that I would love that people, I think, to take from that story is that whenever you guys decided, okay, where are we going to settle down? I mean, truly you had a global perspective to go, well, Europe could be fun. It doesn't have to be
Yeah,
Spokane versus, Mississippi, you know.
right,
So,
right. I mean, when we came back, we knew we wanted to live abroad
yeah,
and give that opportunity really to have those experiences for ourselves, but really for our kids too,
yeah,
and experience culture from living in it. And
yeah,
the UK isn't Vietnam. It's not that 180, but there are some significant nuances to it. And it's one thing to visit, and it's another thing to live, and then live within the processes and everything else, that you really have to relearn,
yeah,
or figure out along the way. So we always wanted a broader view, and it's quite rich, I would say, especially with our kids, because they've been to probably over 20, 25 countries,
wow,
which is just amazing. They're 12 and 14, and when, like I said earlier, is when we're off air, is I don't think I was on a plane until I was 13 or 14,
yeah, yeah,
so, and then I can see that they have a wider view. They have Irish citizenship as well as the U.S., and they're likely to go to university over here, which is great because they'll be close, but it'll be probably in a different country,
yeah,
which is great as well. So yeah, I'm excited to see what their path goes, but they'll have their own journey, and I think what we said earlier is it's great to raise independent kids. Well, there's pros and cons. They're independent,
exactly.
so they're not going to be right in the backyard anymore.
Yeah, yeah. It's all fun and games till they exercise that independence, and then you don't see them, But
Right, right.
it, all right. So with that robust travel history that you possess, give me your favorite spots around the globe where
Ooh,
you've been, and why. What sticks out to you?
sure. Yeah, so Easter Island is actually our favorite spot.
Okay.
Um, so we really like remote places. So we had traveled through South America, Ecuador, Peru, Bolivia, Argentina, Chile, and then we had flights to Easter Island, and that was essentially it. So I don't know, it's probably 4 or 5 hour flight from Chile,
Yeah.
Santiago, and you just know you're in the middle of nowhere. You
Yeah.
know, they have a runway that actually is long enough. The U.S. NASA built a longer runway just in case the space shuttle needed to land there.
Oh wow.
So they have this crazy massive runway, but a tiny, tiny island. Of course, the heads are amazing. It's beautiful. But just the remoteness. And then to kick it off, we knew we were going to get engaged during our trip. But I just really needed to wait until really a cool spot. So, and I also didn't want it to be too further on as well. And we were kind of on this bluff, and I proposed right there on Easter Island, and it was just spur of the moment. I didn't plan anything, and it just happened.
Wow.
That was kind of icing a cake at Easter Island. And we'd like to go back. Definitely, it's just very difficult to get there. Other places, New Zealand, we spent 2 months in New Zealand. We bought a car and sold it back at the end. Unbelievable scenery. So we spent exactly 60 days. I hiked 30 days of those 60 days. Just, you just spend time in the mountains.
Wow.
Vietnam is incredible. Mongolia is up there. Morocco is up there. And then Patagonia, the whole region of Patagonia is,
Yeah.
again, kind of remote places, maybe a bit out of the way. We love Thailand. We love different things, but I think places like Vietnam is a little bit not as touristy and a little bit quieter. Now, I say that this was 2003. That's likely have changed, obviously, pre-COVID. We'll see what happens now. But Mongolia, unbelievable. It's
Yeah.
just wide open spaces, blue sky, really friendly people. And Morocco is very much like that too. So we like places, kind of a generalization, maybe not New Zealand, but where you can take a book and sit there in a cafe all afternoon and have a cup of coffee, maybe a little lunch, and just see the world go by. And
Yeah.
you're just, it's like you're experiencing things as people walk by,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
We like places like that, in general. So, I mean, we love Europe and things, but, you know, you can kind of break down Europe and like, okay, France is not that much different than Luxembourg, and there's nuances, of course, and but if kind of the cafe requirement, the cafe culture is, and the things walking by are fairly similar from even Europe to the U.S. If you want to really expand it, yeah. So yeah, I would say those are some of the top fives. And then with our kids, we had the opportunity to go to Egypt, which was unbelievable with the kids, and they were really young. And then another year, 2014, I think it was, we took the kids to see Santa in Lapland up in Finland. And awesome. That was amazing. So traveling with kids, you can see like a different perspective completely, even if you've been to a place, you can then see it through their eyes, and it's a whole different experience for you,
Well, and so and you bring something up that I think is so cool in that, I'm a Christmas junkie. I mean, I have, I'm still like a little kid. I'm a Christmas junkie. But growing up in the States and the American Christmas, very commercial, very just whoa, and I love it. I'm all about it, man. But then you watch, you watch Love Actually, and you're like, wait a minute, you mean they do Christmas like that over there too? Christmas happens, and then
it's
like
commercial.
Then to your point, you go somewhere even further, and there's still to see the nuances of the celebration of Christmas. How cool for a kid to be able to experience that. That's awesome. I love that.
Yeah. And how that Lapland thing started, this was, I don't know, I think it was in the 70s or 80s. So they have a post office up there that's just on the Arctic Circle. And I think these kids started writing to that post office thinking that's, the North Pole.
Yeah.
And if anyone's listening, obviously it is. And
you checked it out.
And it became this whole industry in this whole area. It's not crazy over the top, but there's definitely a commercial element to it.
Yeah.
But to see, we flew to Helsinki actually, then we took the overnight train up, and it was completely overnight, and it was like the Polar Express kind of element to it, and it was awesome. It was one of the best trips actually.
Okay, so here's before we get off the travel, the chronicles of Matt and Molly's travels around the world, I want to know what is the most, because all right, let me preface this a little bit. I don't want to give one of my stories because this is about your stories, but I have been in a very remote region of a Hunan province of China where I was as stuck and in the middle of nowhere as you could ever be, thinking, it's it. Wow, I wish I could tell Rylan and Abby goodbye. This is awful. This is terrible. And so those things happen because, again, the conveniences that we have, even in rural America, are so far beyond some of the remote areas of other parts of the world. Tell me a time whenever you guys were in a situation where you thought, holy crap, we're either going to end up in a local jail or it's a medical deal. Just what do we do? And
I'm not necessarily dangerous per se, but we didn't know what was going on. There's quite a few of them. In South America, we just busted because there's not that many trains. And I remember we had to switch buses for some reason. Our Spanish was pretty decent at the time, but we switched buses, but your bags are underneath. It's one of those, basically like a charter bus, right? And we didn't know if our bags got on. So the whole time we're going, 4 or 5 hours, and we didn't talk to each other, and we're just going through in our head, like, okay, this costs $5, that costs 10, our backpack is this. We're basically writing it off because we had our obviously money, we had our cards and passports and everything on us, but we're just writing off our bags, and then of course you get there and you already know that our bags were there. So another place was in China. I remember we trained the whole thing in from Vietnam into Guilin, and we're going to Chengdu in Sichuan.
Oh yeah, I've been to Chengdu.
And we had to get off this train. So we're in this train platform. We didn't even know the town we were in, because obviously it's there's no Latin letters,
Right.
And we get to this huge train platform. We didn't even know what train platform to go to for the new train, right? And there's probably 1,000 people. in this train station.
Yeah.
And it just, like, Molly has strawberry blonde hair, and at the time I was a little bit more blondish, but we stuck out like a sore thumb. And finally, if I remember, I think I went up to someone, or someone helped in English, to basically say, okay, Chengdu, and we got there, but we really didn't know what we were going to do,
Yeah.
because there was no, there was no English speakers, and we didn't even know the town we were in,
Yeah. Yeah.
And then there was some kind of questionable things on buses and transfers in Morocco, but it all worked out. It all worked out.
It does, right? I think
Yeah.
that's one of the best parts about traveling like that. And that's, again, my first real crazy trip to the other side of the world, some remote places with a buddy of mine, Jason Smith. And, listener, one of the scariest, one of the most trying experiences you can have, but it turns out to be one of the best experiences, is to be plopped down in the middle of a place where you know not a soul, you don't know the language, you have no idea how you're going to get from point A to point B. I mean, literally, I've done that. Where to take a bus, then a boat, then hitch a ride on the back of a truck.
Yeah.
But it happens. You work in it's that kind of travel and that kind of discomfort that shows you just how amazing other humans are. And that's another thing too that I'm sure you have seen on a much broader scale than I have, is that one-on-one, no matter what corner of the world you're in, human beings can be just pretty amazing as far as friendly, kind, charitable. In China particularly, I mean, those folks, we got a truck stuck on the side of a mountain, and while we're trying to get it out, and the only thing close to us was a little farm. And when I say farm, I mean they had a little shelter for a pig, and that was it, and a dog, and there were potatoes piled in their dirt room shack with no running water and no electricity.
Yeah.
And so we're trying to get this truck out, and all of a sudden, the wife comes up and like waves us over to the house, and we're like, no, we want to work. We got to get down to the bottom of this mountain. It's going to take like 6 hours. She's insistent. Go to the house. We go, and man, like you mentioned earlier, she and I guess her daughters maybe, had prepared this feast for us.
Wow.
And I mean, just sat there, and they relished the experience of just stuffing us with food. It was unbelievable.
And you know what? They're talking about it right now too.
Yeah. And that's what's really sweet, and that's another thing too that I we take for granted, is just the beauty of just getting to see another culture. And it meant something to them. I remember giving a guy a Walmart Armatron digital watch on one of our hikes. Dude, you would have thought I had given him $1 million, and it's just little things like that you're probably not going to experience, in your day to day. So travel and experiences, it's phenomenal, man.
Yeah. And I think it's, going, in the broader view again, it just opens your eyes to, at the end of the day, everyone is really achieving very, very similar things, and they want to be happy, obviously treat their neighbors well, and, obviously family first and all these things. And there's no differences,
Yeah.
And, to that person in that village, in China, we had that experience, like in, the Vietnam story and a number of others, is, they may not have the means to be able to go to Tyler, Texas.
Exactly.
But by you being there actually is a travel experience for them.
Yeah.
Even if you don't speak each other's language.
Yeah.
Just by, breaking bread with each other and have a conversation and, at least trying to communicate, I guarantee you that family speaks about it today,
Yeah, that's really, that's awesome. All right. So let's talk a little bit about working in the UK, because you found success. You and Molly have been there for 11 years, you said? How long have you been there?
2011 we came over. Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing, dude. All right. So I want to cover several things. One, you've had success. You're a senior level executive, which, congratulations, you just assumed a new position, right? So
I did. Yeah.
And kind of talk to us a little bit about not only what's made you successful, but again, something that like these, a lot of the would-be college graduates that might be listening or people that are looking to change careers, you know, you had to experience more than just fitting into a company and learning the kind of the, you know, the culture and that sort of thing. You're dealing with a foreign culture that of, you know, different than that of your origin and everything. What have been the keys to your success, daily habits, monthly habits, what, you know, leadership? Let's go there. And then at some point, I do want to talk about the difference in being in the UK during COVID versus the States, you know, and,
Yep.
you know, disclaimer, listener, don't worry. We're not, it's still a political free zone, you know that, but there, it's just, it's being handled differently all over the world. I thought, well, I've got somebody over in Europe that's having to deal with the same pandemic we are. What's that look like? So, but let's start about just the career. How have you been successful, Matt? What have you deployed to ensure success in the business world?
Yeah. You know, I think what you alluded to, you know, some of that background piece of things, you know, where you grow up, I think adds a lot to it. You know, and there's a lot of other things, you know, obviously perseverance and a lot of hard work. There's a lot of luck and timing, you know, which helps. And really, you know, charting your own course, going back to, you know, travel. So I can hit on some of those different things.
Yeah.
So I'm in the software world. So we really, I started early on in what's called software as a service, or SaaS. That really started in the early 2000s, you know, 2005, somewhere in there. So I started at its infancy, not knowing that, of course. And I really wanted to be in the technology space of my industry. So we did that. And in 2008, I joined a company. I really, like, I went from the account side and commercial side to really just focus on delivery and implementation, hands-on technology to kind of round out experience.
Yeah.
To really think, okay, that could leapfrog and, you know, a wider experience. I went from running teams to actually an individual contributor, which really, really helped. So it might have been a step back, but actually it springboarded my life and actually the opportunity over here. So in 2010, we went from VC back to private equity, and they flushed us the cash to really, you know, push us to scale. And part of that scaling was actually the business over here. So we had a couple salespeople, but no one that really headed up delivery. So you know, there's a lot of us that came back and forth at the time, 09, 2010. And I essentially said, hey, when you need someone like me in Europe, and I knew the answer was we needed someone yesterday.
Yeah.
So I kind of created that opportunity for myself, and just asked, you know,
Yeah.
they might say no, but, you know, you might as well ask. So I can't stress that enough. And we came over on, it wasn't a traditional expat deal with, you know, a big company. You know, the kids are in private school and they have a consultant and things like this. I mean, essentially Molly and I, and let's just be fair, mostly Molly, had to figure out, you know, things like, how do we get our kids into school?
Yeah.
How do we even, you know, turn on Wi-Fi and, you know, our, you know, utilities and everything else. And even you don't really realize this, but you don't have a credit history.
Yeah.
You know, so you have to rethink a lot of those different things, and you get over those hurdles. But essentially, I was tasked to say, grow the business in Europe. So the revenues were very, very small, but what this private equity firm is really doing is actually, and we knew this, is really scaling us up for the next exit. So we had massive, massive growth of both clients and revenue, but also team members, which actually was even more challenging on onboarding people and things like this. So there's a lot of lessons learned, a lot of long weekends and long weeks to help build things. And there's things I would do again and things I wouldn't do. But along the way, I mean, my team it consisted of mostly, you know, in Britain, but it was, you know, British people, Germans, you know, French. We expanded into the continents of the Netherlands, into Italy, you know, Romania, Poland, et cetera, et cetera. So to kind of go through your question probably of, you know, that leadership style is, I think the biggest mistake I made was I came in thinking very, American mentality of go, 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 very, outcome driven.
Yeah.
I would do little things like, catch up on different things over the weekend, but I was actually sending email on the weekend and people were responding, which, is a no-no in Europe. And I know it's becoming that in the U.S. as well, but I didn't know those things. So I kind of shortly had to tone different things down. Don't be overconfident. In the States, you're taught like confidence, all succeeds everything. Your shoulders back and everything else.
Yeah.
It's almost like, okay, tone that down a bit, which helped with the transition, but it was a bit bumpy in the start. So I'll say the first a year and a half was bumpy because I was coming with, we just need to go from a scaling growth, go, go, go. And I needed to tone it down a bit. So I needed to shift gears and really listen to my team members. And then, build in proper, management levels and things like this as well, which came from an organizational structure,
Okay.
So yeah, so we had massive success, and it was an amazing ride. In 2014, we got bought by SAP for $1 billion. So, which was very attractive and very amazing, but that actually started a different chapter. So really, from a small company, when I started in 2008 to a scale up to now you're part of this huge, massive enterprise and integrating with, the different aspects and different lines of business, SAP.
Right.
There was very succinct chapters along the way.
Right.
And then, I wanted to springboard, and which got me the opportunity now of, with my commercial background, with my accounts background, and obviously delivery, to reshape, another chapter into a second gen software within that industry. So I leapfrogged that as well. But again, it's compounding experiences. And, I go through this exercise, and we spoke with McKinsey, and there's this amazing article that he used in development of people. And, S curves and growth in S curves is not a new concept, but using that in a personal development plan sometimes is, and I use that all the time.
Mm-hmm.
To myself, but also my team members as well. So it's really like how much do you really want to invest in the steepness of your learning curve in the new opportunity, right? Or do you want to use your experience and compound that, So it helps people think versus I want to be, CT whatever, right? C level versus, okay, what do you really want to do? And then what do you want to invest your time in, considering also the chapter that you have in your life. You might have kids, be married, and all these different things. So, yeah, I went in a couple different tangents, but it really helped kind of shape things and seeing really what I want to do now, but then also, what I want to utilize those teachings in the past,
Well, you touch on something there too, Matt, that I think it's something I'm constantly trying to preach. I go back to SFA and I talk to students all the time, and I end up mentoring them usually thereafter. And one of the mistakes I made, like I said, I was just that kid. I got out of SFA, and my priority one was have a job waiting, on graduation day, so that I knew I was employed. Went to work for Computer Sciences Corporation.
Oh yeah.
Didn't know what the hell I was doing. It was a job, it was a good job. And it made me sound smart because it had computer science in the title, so it had to be really good. Now, and you're probably more aware of CSC than anybody else because you're in Europe.
Yeah.
Stateside, no one knew what the heck CSC was, because at the time I joined, I guess it was like 70-30, 70% government contracts, 30% commercial stuff. And it was mostly European business and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But anyway, so it didn't occur to me to even plan a life, like, what do you really like doing? What do you really enjoy doing? And so I like what you talked about there as far as on the S curve and kind of deciding what trajectory you're going to take, is putting in there and being able to be honest with yourself about what do you like doing? What do you enjoy doing? And hey, if by pursuing that path, the title follows, okay, great.
Right. Exactly.
But it's more about just where do I want to grow, and what's going to afford me the ability. And I think that's one of the things, man, that you and Molly have executed so swimmingly, is just to I mean, would you agree that that's part of what's made you successful in the software career that you find yourself in now, is because it affords you the ability to continue to travel, continue to see, broaden your horizons within an industry. And that's another thing too that I think a lot of people believe that, well, if I want to follow this path of entrepreneurship or world travel or whatever we kind of hold as these unattainable goals, then I have to quit my job, sell everything. No, you don't. You just have to map it out, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think this exercise, it allows, it's a time quotient. How much time do you really want to invest to really get that S curve as sharp as you can? Now, normally, I ask people to actually start from their first job, and it could be during high school, but after university, whatever it is, and basically link them, per role, per company, whatever it is. And usually the steepness is in the beginning, of course, because you don't really know anything after school.
Exactly. Right.
But they need to realize that actually they might only have 6-7 years of experience, but actually they learned a plethora of things just in that 6-7 years, right? And then, at that point, they might be in their late 20s, early 30s, whatever it is, and then they might be settling down. And then you have to realize, okay, I want to be, to your point, I want to be some entrepreneur. Okay, that's going to be this curve, right? That's like that. Are you really going to do that? And you need to be honest with yourself, right?
Exactly.
So I mentor and coach a lot of people, like old colleagues and things like this, and obviously current, team members. And it's a good exercise. And then also I do it with myself, every 6-12 months, like, okay, am I on the right path? Do I really what I want to invest time in? I realized I needed to spend more time in networking and, maybe even these type of things, within my industry, speaking more, different engagements, and within the customer success world, within software and things like this. So again, where do I want to invest my time? Not necessarily for my own outcome, but just for my own enjoyment, and going back to what do I enjoy doing? Come to find out, I don't, the team members that old colleagues that were on my team that I coach and mentor, I really, really enjoy doing that, because ultimately my success, going back to, ultimately, how do you map out plans and goals for a client to get successful using a platform, etc., but also the team member, and if you can nail those two different things down, success from a revenue point of view typically does come, if you can nail those two main pillars down, right? That's usually my main focus. Employee engagement, client engagement, focusing on those. Now, patterns and things, I'm a big proponent of, the 10-5, methods of, plan your week. It might not be 10 minutes, might be an hour, it could be 2 hours in being a week, but, and then plan accordingly for the next day or, the next morning, and those type of principles. But, I coach.
I want to stop there real quick.
Because I know you have a whole checklist of different things.
You got me all giddy. Now you start talking about plans and stuff like that. So talk a little bit about that. What does that look like for you as a professional? How do you go as far as, like, one of the things I've really, really benefited from lately, Matt, is my biggest problem is when I'm working on one thing, there's 5 other things that I think I'm supposed to be working on. And so I'm admitting a really big weakness of mine is that prioritization can be tough for me at times. And a lot of what I do is so nebulous, podcasting, writing, and that sort of thing. It's like, well, they take different sorts of priority. But what I've learned is if I go, okay, I am going to work on editing the podcast for 30 minutes at this time.
Mm-hmm.
That there's something mental about that says, okay, regardless of what else is out there to do, I'm only giving 30 minutes to this right now. So I can handle 30 minutes. And then at the end of 30 minutes, I can determine whether I want to, if I've got the white canvas, for maybe 15 more minutes. So that's been a good strategy for me. Tell me how you plan out your day, your week, and how you fit in. It's not all about just planning the revenue generating appointments, right? It's about recreation, reading, self-education. So what does that look like for you?
Yeah, so I mean, from a weekly standpoint, I'll actually start more probably at a yearly, and kind of work back. So obviously revenue targets, but then also there's customer successes. So going back to those pillars, and
Yep.
then the team member as well. So those three pillars are typically, with our teams, the focus areas.
Yep.
We've used SWOT and these type kind of different methods to really say, okay, where do we really need to invest? And usually that investment is quarterly.
Okay.
So we say, okay, we need to be here in 12 months or even 2 years, depending on what the trajectory is, and then really work back from it. I mean, you know all this, but and then those quarterly, then you break down in monthly, and then what I try to do is really not delegation can be a 4-letter word for some,
Yeah.
but I really see it going back to employee engagement and development items and things like this, is using those as opportunities to really be, a resume builder for someone to learn.
Yeah.
So you might coach and mentor someone because, sometimes these are things that no one knows how to do them.
Right.
We've never done them. So, hey, let's give it to whomever that is really looking for growth. Of course, we're going to help and support and feed in and give everything else, but we look for those different things, the problems we need to solve, whether it's, a threat or a weakness or what have you, and then break them down into quarterly typically, and then give them to individuals going back to their growth trajectory if they really want to grow and learn, and again, be a resume builder, because that helps with employee engagement, but also I want them to walk out of the company being a better person.
Right.
At the end of the day, what are we trying to do?
Right.
And then from the weekly can be the hardest part. And I think this is what you're saying, right? Is,
Absolutely.
Because, I had a meeting at 2:00 today and, something came up and, it's a net new, and that meeting at 2 got pushed to Monday, right?
Yeah.
I think you have to be good at really prioritizing on the fly. That was more important than the Monday. I mean, it could wait till Monday. So you have to quickly prioritize on the fly, but I'm a list person. I have to check it off. Usually when things are chaotic, it's because I didn't write it down.
Absolutely.
And I do everything electronically. I plan my week from my calendar, but also I block my time, and I don't give up that time typically, unless again, something's really, again, in a hot quadrant. I've coached people to use a quadrant. Now I'm kind of blanking on, like, hey, these are the hot things. These are the things that are important to someone else. And, I think it's a Covey.
It's a code. The four quadrants, and it's like the 1, 2, 3, 4, and the stuff that's like, hey, I can't do anything in quadrant 2 until I get these out of the way because they are the highest priority. And there's that crap that just kind of sits there. Yeah, I use that for a while. It's actually very effective.
Yeah, and it helps with let's just say newer employees to the business, because they get rabbled into, they want to have customer satisfaction, but a lot of times those things that are, pertinent or really priority to that client or partner aren't really that important to the whole book of what it now, meaning they can't necessarily shift their whole day and drop everything. It needs to get done maybe that week, but does it really need to get done that day? So, and it helps from a prioritization to really ask the right questions. You learn, again, through experience, is if you don't ask the questions like, hey, when do you really need this? What is the drop?
Yes.
And if you don't ask, then you don't know. And you think it's a priority, but it might not be. And this is from, managing up, but then also managing your clients and things like this too. So it's a bit of a mixed bag, but everything starts with 10 and 5. So at least 10 minutes. It's usually longer for the week, and then wrap up the day, or I do it in the morning. What am I going to do that day? What, again, against the wider spectrum of that month, against that quarter, etc. Yeah.
So how are you staying sharp? What are you reading? What things do you do for self-education?
Yeah. So I really gravitate to stories of perseverance and overcoming things. And I really enjoy case studies and research and things like this. I mean, you mentioned actually the book on the Quan Cosby podcast about Bold. That I need to read that.
Yeah.
That sounds interesting.
With, David Goggins?
Yeah, I need to read that book.
Dude,
I really like, Jim Collins, and what he looks at, obviously Good to Great and Built to Last and things like this. the best pure how leadership book that I've ever read
Uh-huh.
was South, Shackleton South. It's not a business book.
Oh, I gotta write
It's
that down.
it's likely one of the greatest, most amazing stories ever told, and nonfiction. So about perseverance, about leadership, obviously about adventure. So it's this was during the push before World War One,
Okay.
to claim the South Pole. So obviously there was a British contingent. There was eventually Norwegian actually did it. Norwegian team did it. I can't remember the other teams. I think there was a French team. But again, before World War One, so it kind of tells through he was the leader. Sir Shackleton was the leader, and they get stuck in the ice. So they get stuck in the ice floe. And I'm not going to ruin it because it's just mind-boggling what these guys had to go through. But they get stuck in the ice, and essentially they were camped on the floe of ice, and the boat crumbled in front of them. So they were looking at their boat crumbling. That's the way home. Obviously, there's no Wi-Fi or satellite
Right.
phone to call anyone back in, I don't know, 1909 or whatever it was. So the leadership that he went through is unbelievable, and the perseverance. You need to read the book. It's
Okay.
unbelievable, you
Yeah.
know. And then I'm going to start reading actually Bill Gates and Warren Buffett's list.
Yeah.
I'm actually going to start with business adventures. So again, I like case studies and thinking back, but that's from I think the early 70s, late 60s, if I remember. So and it tells stories about Xerox and different companies. So I'm going to pick that up. But right now, I'm actually taking a certification in further sailing certificates. So I'm heads down in sailing,
Nice.
all things sailing, and I'm reading a book on tides. So the obviously what tides are, but then also the cultural effects of them.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I kind of read a mixed bag of different things. And then podcasts. So I like the Kingsley Grant show from emotional intelligence and leadership.
Oh,
And
I need to. Okay, so I've never listened to that one.
yeah, Kingsley Grant.
Okay. What others?
Yours?
Oh, of course. I mean, that's the life changer of them all.
I don't listen. I got hooked on this guy, but I don't listen to a ton, to be honest. From emotional intelligence, obviously Goleman is the quintessential, emotional intelligence. He literally wrote the book on it.
Yeah. Right.
But yeah, I like case studies. I like to research things. I ultimately like what is the journey and the path and the decision making throughout. This is kind of going back to Shackleton. It's how do they make those decisions to
Yeah.
do these unbelievable things, and people's lives were at stake.
Right.
The leadership in that book is just incredible.
Well, and it's so I was listening to Tucker Max talk about basically the power of story, and as it relates to leadership in particular, and like whenever you're like frame control, a lot we're much less effective when we're just telling someone what to do and then how to do it, right? Because that automatically creates the opportunity for resistance, or like if I tell you, like we were just talking about earlier, college, and do you send your kids to college or not? Here in the States, becoming very questionable as to whether the
Mm.
values there. So if I tell one of my daughters, hey, you're just not going to go to college, and she says, yes, I am, I have to go to college, and I say, then automatically there becomes an argument. Whereas if she says, dad, I have to go to college, if I were to pose a question or tell a story, I just talked to a friend, he sent his daughter off to school, and it went, she graduated 4.0, racked up about 100 grand in student debt, and she can't find a job. Why do you think that is? What, not in a condescending way, but if you just present things, the power of story. And I think that people, like, I loved the Shackleton South analogy, and the fact that that's a story, that's a book to read on leadership, on how to do things. That's why I
Mm.
love biographies. There
Yeah.
are a lot of amazing books by like Stephen Covey and Jim Collins and all these guys on, here are, Drucker, all of Drucker's stuff,
Mm.
Seth Godin on, here are how to apply tactics and methodologies for success that they've seen others execute and trained others to. But to me, there's just something about a story in real time that had real impact, and then taking that and applying that discipline somewhere else. The story makes it stick. There's something to
Yeah,
that.
I mean, but I gravitate like longitude. You just made me think of that book Longitude, which is unbelievable. So they basically had to solve this problem of, and it's for navigation at the time, and long story short, this is why, I'm sitting close to GMT, Greenwich Mean Time,
Yeah.
and that's the end of it. But it's the race to actually solve that problem, and obviously there's politics involved and wrangling and blah blah blah, but to solve that problem, and as a case study of it, another one I just remembered is the Long Walk. So I don't know if I think they made a movie of it, but well, again, one of the most incredible stories ever. It kind of taps into my travel, these Shackleton, but also leadership. So it's a story. It was a Polish cavalryman, and when the Soviets came one way in Poland, and then the Germans obviously came the other way, he got stuck with the Soviets, and then ultimately he got sent to Siberia in the Gulag. And he and about a handful of other people, they escaped the Gulag. But what do you do in Siberia in 1940, whatever, right? So where do they go? They decided to go south because that's the only way they could go, because they needed to get to British India, to the Allies, right? So they walked. It took them 9 months through the Gobi, through China, through Tibet, and then ultimately, in British and India, But again, perseverance, overcoming odds, it taps into the travel piece, because, they're rolling into these villages walking into China, and they had no money, of course, and their rags and everything else. They were poorer than, the peasants in these different villages. So, I gravitate towards those things, really, the story and overcoming things and solving problems, because ultimately, to your point, in the software world, it's not always the sexiest thing, right? But the people that can actually make it in a demonstration or pitch, you have to really resonate to the audience, and you really actually need to be able to tell a story. So why are these different things important? Or we could do it this way because of, X, Y, and Z, reason, which could help you do, these type of outcomes. So you need to kind of tell a story to get them to kind of grasp onto it, but also it gives you credibility to say, okay, these are the people that we want to actually solve this problem for us. So, I mean, I 100% agree. And actually, going back to your college, it's, in university in the U.S., I'm sure people are saying, hey, if I'm going to spend these tens of or hundreds of thousands, why don't I invest in a company for you to start up something?
I tried to get my youngest. I mean, she's got an entrepreneurial spirit, and I tried to get her to consider that. And she's like, no, University of Colorado sounds pretty awesome, Dad. I don't have to do really anything there.
Fair, it does.
I'm looking up because there's a book I want to recommend to you that it's downstairs on my nightstand. I just started it. It's Frederick Douglass's autobiography, but it has a subtitle. I want to make sure you have that. But man, if ever there were a book here, let's see here. It's not Prophet of Freedom. It's a different one. Where is it? It's something to the effect. I'm gonna get this wrong. For some reason, it's not coming up.
Just send it to me an email or text
I will,
me.
because it reads like a novel. I mean, it's amazing. I mean, he literally takes his story and gives you a firsthand account of, first of all, growing up, or when he's very young, being naive to the fact that there was no such thing, that his family didn't own the little cabin that his grandparents lived in, and how much he loved that. And then coming to the realization that one day that would come to an end. He would be moved from his grandparents' home. And he describes in detail the little cabin he grew up in, the small yard he played in, the slave master that he knew of but never actually knew, and just how the evolution of his thoughts started coming into being of slavery and ownership and what that meant, dude, if ever, I mean, and again, I haven't completed it yet. It's, I
Man,
hope
you're
it's
kind
not
of
long.
making me tear up a bit. That's unbelievable because you don't really think about that in a kid's perspective, you know?
Exactly. And his writing is so eloquent. It's so beautiful. I mean, I think I'm reading, at times I forget, I'm not reading a Faulkner novel. I'm reading a real life account, something that
Mm,
actually happened. It's beautiful. Uh, that's my recommendation for you.
okay, great.
All right.
Love it.
Howard, before we get into just kind of like some little anecdotal, I just out of curiosity for the listener to hear what it's like living in the UK during the era of the Rona versus the U.S. Because you have been involved in from recruiting and now software that is purely and pretty much, from what I understand, correct me if I'm wrong, human capital focused, right? I mean, you
Yep.
really a lot of analysis. Okay, so tell me a little bit about what executives need to understand about the changes that you've seen now in over a decade of experience in the professionals that are coming out of undergrad and going into the workforce, and how can they better understand them, their needs, what drives them. I'm actually doing a consulting project right now where I'm helping with some of this stuff, and just another program that I like. We mentioned Covey earlier. I'm implementing the 4 disciplines of execution
Okay.
and 40X, which highly recommend. I'm loving it. It's a great way, especially in a sales organization, to not focus so much on rear view mirror metrics, which, back in the day, especially, you just look at quarterly and monthly,
Yeah.
reports and go, well, we didn't hit our numbers. What are we going to do to do it? It focuses purely on lead measures, those habits and activities that, increase the likelihood of actually hitting the wildly
Yeah.
important goal, as they call it. So highly recommend that. But anyway, uh, talk to us a little bit about the difference in the employee, the evolution of the professional that you're seeing.
Wow. Yeah, that's a hot button. And then I would say even there's some cultural nuances within there too, depending on the country they're coming from and things. I mean, this is where I'm talking about the employee experience
Yeah.
is needs to be just as important as that client experience.
Yeah.
Years ago, and I don't know what year it was. I mean, I didn't believe in that, so there was a total shift, and it was probably millennials that really pushed it,
Yeah.
in the last 10 years. And I think it's actually a good thing overall. Now, it took a lot of us to get used to that, and there's a lot of memes and everything else, making jokes about it. But I think ultimately is going back to how do I make whomever it is, whether it's 22-year-old, 35-year-old, 40-something-year-old, how do we make those individuals better? And then what time and investment do they want to do? Because some people might want to grow more than others. So that gives you a bit of a litmus test, or gives you kind of a spectrum of, okay, who wants to invest time? And then you give them opportunities, Now, I do believe in a trust first mentality, to give, hey, even just someone off out of school, trust them. You hire the right people. You have to hire attitude and not necessarily, not always experience, but potential.
Yeah.
You know, and that's tougher to gauge, but it helps to really say, okay, we're going to give people opportunities to fail, and of course you need to support them when they do fail, because they're going to fail.
Right.
And then here's the kicker, and you can't necessarily control this, is are they going to learn from falling down?
Right.
Right. Just the way we've all done. And again, going back to my experience and yourself, humble means actually help. So not everyone comes from humble means. So I'm a trust first mentality. Like I was alluding to, I came over here and I was uber confident and probably go too much. So now I kind of take it down a notch, really try to listen, coach and mentor before really telling. I know kind of what to do, but how do I get them to say it?
Yeah. Yeah.
Again, a learning opportunity. But again, focusing on those two pillars: client experience and ultimately employee experience, and how those things intersect to ultimately drive a business forward. I see that is tremendous, because everyone wants to get in tech and everything else, but by focusing on the employee and enabling them to grow. Now they need to take the reins and grow, but that's usually the focus. Now the next generation, I'm not 100% sure, to be honest. We'll have to learn. But that's what I've seen success with the millennial group. And I think that's fairly universal. There are some cultural nuances, of course, on what's important to Europeans and even individual countries versus, versus in the States, et cetera. So, as we sit August, I know that all of France is off, pretty much. You're not going to get any work done. Germany is probably a couple weeks where it's quiet. So why I kind of bring that up is, people get 25, 30, 35 days vacation. That's actually the most important thing to them a lot of times. So, and they would do away with even a great opportunity to do something sometimes and still make sure that they have that balance and that time with family and friends,
Yeah, I definitely see that there is a shift. The quality of life is becoming, the primary target from the young people that I work with and talk to and mentor. They, you ask them, like, if you'd asked you and I whenever we were, coming out of SFA, kind of what's the brass ring or whatever, it probably lists things that were more material, maybe. I don't know. I probably would have things that were kind of supposedly representations of success, leading towards financial security, whatever the case, house, These young people that I'm mentoring now are much more interested in the workplace purpose, making the contribution, which would be great for an employer. If an employer does it right, what I have found has kind of been eye-opening to me, being an entrepreneur for so many years, is you don't be so focused on always got to get them more money. No, if you'll just give them responsibility and make them feel like they're contributing, that means more, right?
Well, and purpose, you hit a great topic is, working with companies like Vodafone and Unilever and, Barclays and these big companies where, sustainability is almost as paramount as actually revenue. So Unilever knows that they need to get out of the business of plastics, right? And, and clean water and everything, because they know in, 15, 20 years that they're not going to have a business, right? So, so purpose from an employee, but also purpose from a strategic company and big companies, right? Driving towards that. So that's paramount and front and center. And then really, I think going through the employee pillar is being heard. Like, we graduated probably, and definitely the boomers, right? We were pure Gen X, and you get a job, CSC or, et cetera, and you're not supposed to be heard. You're supposed to do, right? And it took a while for myself, and I think our generation and definitely the boomers, but to really understand that it's like, okay, they know that they may not, make the decision, but if they can be heard along the way, if it's just listened to, and actually they might have a really good idea, and so to be open with that was the biggest, shift, I would say. And just listen. Start with listening, start with trusting, let them fail and tell them you're going to fail, and that's okay.
Right.
And there's a lot of cliches of fail fast and all these different things, but it is true, And at the end of the day, you have to know what the risks are, and let them fail on certain things versus others on big things. You might want to step in a little bit, but you have to, again, prioritize those different things.
And I think too, one of the things that I try to do differently than to the senior manager out there that's not looking for these things, like for instance, you mentioned something about a lot of people want to be in tech or whatever. If you don't understand where these 19 to 23-year-olds are getting their information, with the kind of the soup they're swimming in every day, you're an idiot. You're behind. You can't communicate with them. And the thing is, I try to stay up on the things that, like we talked about, Gary V. What Gary Vaynerchuk's talking about. I want to understand how people are monetizing Instagram, Facebook, whatever platform is out there. Not to be cool to my kids, but to just understand how I can not to speak the language, but also be with them so we can actually have be on the same page during conversation, because that's where it's
Yeah, I mean, a good example of that. So a chairman I know, he took a CEO job at a software company, and he said the Glassdoor rating is like 2.1 or something, you know, and I think it's on a 4-point scale or maybe 5, I can't remember. But you know, he's a late 50s, mid 50s guy. You know, he's taken companies through exits, but his first thing he said, the Glassdoor rating is this: I need to get it up, because he knows that the talent that he needs to be able to turn the ship around are going to look at Glassdoor. You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
so it's little things like that that you just need to be cognizant of, and it's great that he says that, you know, and he has the
Absolutely.
pulse. You know,
Yeah.
yeah.
So, all right, well, let's talk a little bit about I'm just curious, how are you surviving COVID? You look healthy, you look great, you look the same as I left you at SFA. So well done, sir. The European lifestyle's treating you well. What is the difference over there? And just from your perspective, from looking from over there to over here, because one of the things I really enjoy doing, I still subscribe to a Shanghai newspaper. I love to read foreign news to hear how they're reporting on the States. So, two things. One, I just want to know, how are you, Molly, and the kids doing?
Yeah.
How's it changed your work? You know, how are you functioning? You know, not you, but you and the entire population that surrounds you. But also, kind of, what's the perspective of what's going over here at the clown show?
Yeah, that's probably that's a bit of a hot button, but you know, Molly, she teaches and she's a librarian at my kids' school, so they go to an international school now, and
That's awesome.
which is amazing. It's right in our village. It's just a quick walk away, but this is a tight-knit community, and you know, very small classes and things, and you know, like I said earlier, you know, off air is, you know, March and into April was a shock to all of us. So it's like shifting to online, and the whole world, right?
Yeah.
So it's a complete shock. But also you get into what ifs and everything else. And, you know, what I found was the BBC is actually very, very good. And it's, you know, I don't want to bring up different news outlets in the U.S., but it's very, I find it very moderate. Okay.
Yeah.
To me, it's a Walter Cronkite. This is the facts. You know, you have your opinion sections and they'll tell you when, but this is the facts. I'm reading the facts. Right.
Yeah.
But even to that, we had to kind of turn it off, and that really helped in long walks and things like this. But it was a shock to the world, right? And we didn't just know, you know, the UK, I think overall has done a decent job, but there's a lot of people that have said, well, you know, they didn't close borders enough. We live fairly close to Heathrow, about 15 minutes drive without traffic, but we didn't lock down enough, quick enough. And, you know, you're talking about, you know, Amsterdam's just a 50-minute flight. You know, Paris is just either a train, you know, that you guys had, or, you know, it's just 60 minutes, you know, flight. So, but after that, they really just said, hey, here are the facts. And I'm not a Boris fan from Brexit, but I think he's done a good job. And I think the whole administration has done a good job. They've done very, very good at, you know, supporting people that lost their jobs from a furlough point of view and furlough scheme. And there's talks of, you know, extending that. Of course, that's going to affect our taxes longer term and things like this, but that's a whole separate question. Yeah. So I think they got knocked that they didn't close quick enough, but once they did, and here's the kicker and probably the hot potato in the room, but overall, you know, Europeans, and this is a sweeping generalization, but have a different relationship with their government than a lot of Americans do. Yeah. At least the outspoken Americans that you kind of, you know, are on TV and, you know, have the sound bites. So, you know, in general, most people say, okay, this is what the government's going to do. Here's the science. This is what, you know, we're going to do. And then from a British point of view, you know, it goes back to, you know, keep calm and carry on. It's very, very much like that. So, you know, there was obviously clapping people, you know, every Thursday we had a clap for the NHS and the healthcare workers and things. But what I saw was amazing was we live in London, or outside London. It's very much like the Northeast where and you came to London, you know, you don't talk to strangers, you know, or even if you do, then they might think you're crazy. And you kind of know your neighbors, but it's not like Texas where it's like, hey, John, hey, you know. But this situation has really opened things up, from a caring about neighbors and, hey, how are you doing? And I walk a lot, and, you know, walking past, normally I wouldn't say hi to someone, but now it's like, hey, how you doing? And obviously moving out of someone's way. And then early May, we have a bank holiday early May, and this was the 75th anniversary of Victory in Europe Day. And we had a whole block party where all the neighbors are out, everyone's social distancing, but having a couple drinks, getting to know people, and, you know, to take a positive spin on this experience. I think that's a positive spin of people really, you know, knowing their neighbors, caring about their neighbors, opening up a little bit more, you know, from a London sense. And then, you know, a lot of people, you know, none of us like to wear masks, but everyone kind of grins and bears it and does it, you know.
Right.
And again, kind of listening to the science, and, you know, and again, a different relationship with their government of, you know, hey, this is what we need to do. Let's get together. You know, there's going to be outliers, but for the most part, that's what I've seen, you know, and experienced. Now, your other question, around the perspective back to the U.S., I think, you know, and I'm included here, you know, I think it's very, very confusing. You know, and as being American, you know, I have neighbors that, you know, my neighbors are British, and the wife she's Brazilian, and a couple of Brits next door, and American and Brit across the street, and things like this. And as an American living here, you're always asked, well, why is this happening, or why is that happening? And usually, you know, I don't know. I can't answer that question. So I'm confused myself, you know, why is it division, and why has it become political for everything? And, you know, why? And I don't have answers for that, to be honest. So, it's not been adversarial or combative at all, but it's, I have my own questions, because in a lot of ways, and I said this to friends that have been over here for quite some time, is, you know, you're not British, although I'm getting citizenship this year. You're not British, and I'll never really be British. But, you know, at some point, when does your home country become a little bit more foreign than you're used to? You know? I don't know when the tipping point is, but I think I'm there. You know?
No, it's not the America that you left, for sure. I think that it's weird, man. You know, I think I mentioned this on the Quan Cosby podcast, that I think we're going through some birth pangs, you know, but will we birth something better? It's what we usually do in America. You know, we usually birth.
You know, I think, you know, if you look at historical patterns of different things, and, you know, people try to make these things into chapters, right or wrong, but, you know, getting out of this and better understanding, you know, of, you know, obviously diversity and just helping others, you know, I think there can be a lot of positive out of it.
That's what I hope, Matt. I mean, you know, because unfortunately, like, I love to hear that for you guys, that, you know, during this time you have found some solidarity. You know, I can tell you here that has not been the case. I mean, the mask issue, you either have a wagging finger because, or a naughty look if you don't have it on, but you also, which I could care less about this, I'm sure there are parts of the country where if you walk in with a mask, then you're like, what's wrong? What are you afraid of? You know, as opposed to just, this is what my family and I've decided. And, you know, I'm thinking that, you know, I hate the mask. I don't want to wear a mask, but if it can help somebody else, if it can help an 80-year-old stay safe, I'm willing to make that very small sacrifice. You know, it's
right. I mean, it's all about the percentages, and I mean, at the end of the day,
So it is. I'd say, you know, hey, man, you're confused looking from across the pond over. We're confused being in the middle of it. The thing that I'm hoping is that people wake up and realize just that there are agendas, you know, on every side of it. There's agendas at play. Just and, you know, Quan and I talked about this after George Floyd and all the racial tension and all that we've dealt with in the States. I said, man, one of the things that I strive to do is whenever people start talking about this group or that group, I try to bring it down to an individual friend of mine that may look like that group. And so before even making an assessment, I try to bring it back. Okay, wait a minute. What's my relationship like with my buddy Quan Cosby? What did we talk about? What's his heart? He knows my heart. Let's just keep it there. And,
yeah, I mean, I think what you're saying, and correct me if I'm wrong, is like find the source, right? Whether it's this information and things getting passed around, or to your point is, hey, have a conversation. I don't know if you've checked out Emmanuel Acho's. He's now on YouTube with ask tough questions to a black man, I think it was.
Yes.
But,
I watched the Matthew McConaughey episode.
Yeah, that was the first one. Little things like that. I mean, having conversations. And knowing the source versus just quick sound bites and not really knowing what the angle that source is coming from and things like this. So yeah, I mean, it's this isn't going to be. This is definitely from a planning point of view around for the next good year. I mean, knock on wood. But yeah, I mean, my heart's out to people that obviously are massively affected from a health point of view and obviously financial point of view. And unfortunately, I don't know if that's going to go away anytime soon. So how do we help our neighbors is my take,
Well, Matt, dude, I told you there's never any dead space. I knew this would be I mean, we've gone an hour and a half, and I could go another hour just because it's good to catch up with you. And I'm just, again, not to sound patronizing, but just I'm proud of the way you've executed, man. I mean, you've lived a rich and full life, and you're just getting started. I mean, that you've traveled, you got beautiful children, you and Molly. You've really, really sketched out. And I love that we spent so much time on, because to me, it's like the book that I've written. That's what I try to talk about. It's, work and whatever that is.
Yeah.
It should be always just to support the true life you want to live. And I think that, at least from afar, I've watched you, and I think that you've executed on that very well. You've been very successful as an executive and in the business world, but it seems to me like what the parts that really, really matter, that when the kids are grown and there's grandkids, and you and Molly are sitting there, the things you're going to talk about is not the quarter you crushed in the software industry.
It's going to be having breakfast outside of Way with the Vietnamese family. Yeah,
exactly. So, man, thank you for taking the time to come on.
Appreciate it. I appreciate the words, and can't think highly of you. So, and again, it's an honor to be added to obviously a significant roll call of Texas Titans, but then again, the hot tot intern. Can't say no.
Yeah, I know it's special for everyone that gets to visit with the intern. But hey, now look, I'm going to tell you, I expect the LinkedIn profile to be updated. That you are now a tech. You put that right as one of your titles.
Yeah.
It's official.
Well, if you're branching out from an internship, think about a European chapter.
Ooh.
Think about that.
Oh, you wouldn't have to tell Jimlyn twice. If there were a way to come over and we'd be there, man. We'd be all over. But seriously, I do want to make the trip over sooner than later. We've got to get together the next time I'm over there. Let's make.
Yeah, and I need to get that Texas Feed and Fertilizer hat too.
Yeah, I've got to put that in the mail. I've got your address. You don't have to resend it because it's Surrey, so I know where you are.
Yes, Surrey.
All right, I'm on it. All right, brother. Thank you, man.
Thanks, buddy. Thank you, man.
Don't hang up. I'm going to tell you goodbye off camera. Just a second.